Here's how Daenerys killed her mom, same as Tyrion killed both his parents. The world of Westeros is defined by power, betrayal, and family. Few stories capture this darker side of inheritance and ambition better than the tragic and shocking events surrounding Daenerys Targaryen and Tyrion Lannister. Both of these iconic characters committed acts that changed the course of their families forever, killing their own parents, each in a way that defined their destiny and altered the political landscape of Westeros. Today, we're diving into the chilling parallels between Daenerys and Tyrion's deadly choices, examining how ambition, revenge, and tragedy collided to create some of the most unforgettable moments in Game of Thrones. Let's start with Daenerys Targaryen. From her earliest days, she was marked by the shadow of her father, the Mad King Aerys II, and the complicated legacy of the Targaryen dynasty. But it wasn't Aerys who ultimately met his end at the hands of Daenerys, it was her mother, Rhaella Targaryen. While most fans focus on Daenerys' iconic rise across the narrow sea, fewer fully grasp the tragic circumstances that led to her mother's death and how this shaped her into the ruthless, determined ruler she would become. Rhaella's life was tragic from the start. Married to Aerys, her days were consumed by fear, political manipulation, and isolation in the Red Keep and Dragonstone. Her fate was intertwined with the madness of her husband and the turbulent politics of the Seven Kingdoms. When Robert's rebellion swept across Westeros, the Targaryen dynasty faced imminent collapse. Daenerys, mother, weakened by years of trauma and childbirth, became a casualty of the chaotic forces tearing the family apart. It was a combination of political necessity, survival instincts, and Daenerys' growing assertion of agency that led to her mother's death, a death that symbolically marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. The act of killing her mother, whether direct or indirect, was not just a moment of bloodshed, it was a statement. Daenerys severed the final ties to her childhood, the world of dependency and fear, and embraced her destiny as the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, and the ruler who would claim Westeros. In essence, the act was a mix of survival, revenge, and ambition, a necessary, if tragic, step toward her rise to power. Now, let's turn to Tyrion Lannister, the cleverest and most underestimated Lannister of them all. Tyrion's relationship with his parents, Tywin and Joanna Lannister, was defined by resentment, manipulation, and cruelty. Tywin despised him for his dwarfism, blaming him for the death of Joanna during childbirth. Joanna's death left Tyrion emotionally scarred, and Tywin's relentless disdain only deepened that wound. Over the years, Tyrion endured humiliation, betrayal, and emotional abuse, cultivating both intelligence and a hidden ruthlessness that would later define his actions. Tyrion's revenge was methodical and shocking. He killed his father, Tywin, in a moment of both anger and poetic justice, using a crossbow while Tywin sat in the privy. This act was both personal and symbolic. Tyrion exacted punishment on the man who had made his life miserable, who had underestimated his intelligence, and who had denied him love and respect. He also indirectly caused the death of his mother, Joanna, years earlier through the circumstances of her tragic demise, a trauma that shaped his worldview and his capacity for both empathy and cold calculation. The parallels between Daenerys and Tyrion are striking. Both killed their parents in ways that were tied to the weight of legacy and personal destiny. Both acts were motivated by a combination of revenge, survival, and the pursuit of power. And in both cases, the deaths left indelible marks on their psyches, shaping their decisions, their leadership styles, and the fates of those around them. For Daenerys, killing her mother, or being the indirect cause of her mother's death, freed her from the shackles of family obligation and the shadow of a crumbling dynasty. It allowed her to embrace her identity fully, step into her role as a ruler, and later confront the brutal realities of leadership, including the destruction of King's Landing. For Tyrion, killing Tywin and acknowledging the tragic legacy of his mother's death allowed him to break free from the toxic cycle of Lannister dominance, reclaim agency over his life, and redefine his place in a family that had always marginalized him. Both acts, however, came with profound consequences. Daenerys' actions set her on a path toward a moral and political turning point. Her decision to prioritize destiny and power over familial loyalty foreshadowed her later ruthlessness, the fiery destruction of King's Landing, where she chose conquest over mercy. Tyrion, on the other hand, faced exile and political isolation. His actions freed him from his father's tyranny, but also forced him into a life of diplomacy, survival, and strategic alliances in a world that would always question his loyalty and judgment. These deaths also underscore a recurring theme in Game of Thrones: the personal costs of power. Both Daenerys and Tyrion paid a high price for their choices. By killing or being responsible for the deaths of their parents, they severed the last ties to innocence, family, and personal loyalty. They became figures defined by both brilliance and tragedy, capable of inspiring loyalty and fear in equal measure. In essence, they illustrate the harsh reality of Westeros: power demands sacrifice, and family is often the first casualty. Interestingly, the outcomes of these actions highlight the differences between Daenerys and Tyrion. Daenerys, fueled by destiny, dragons, and fire, embraced destruction as a tool of liberation and conquest. Her mother's death was a stepping stone to the kind of radical power she would wield over the Seven Kingdoms. Tyrion, however, relied on intellect, strategy, and subtlety. His parent killing was both a personal vendetta and a calculated political move. One embraced fire and destiny, the other embraced cunning and survival. Yet both share the common thread of legacy and the burden of parental influence. These events also shaped their relationships with others. Daenerys' path to the Iron Throne was built on fear, loyalty, and the awe inspired by her dragons, a consequence of the ruthless choices she made early in life, including her mother's death. Tyrion's alliances were forged through negotiation, wit, and occasionally coercion, reflecting the careful, deliberate choices that emerged from his family's toxic influence. Both demonstrate how the deaths of parents, whether direct or indirect, can redefine a person's approach to power, morality, and leadership. Ultimately, the deaths of their parents were not merely acts of revenge or survival, they were transformative moments. They forced Daenerys and Tyrion to confront the complexities of morality, loyalty, and ambition. They cemented the idea that in Westeros, family ties can be both a source of strength and a chain that binds, and that breaking those chains often comes at the highest cost. In conclusion, the parallels between Daenerys Targaryen and Tyrion Lannister are more than narrative coincidences. Both were shaped by the deaths of their parents, both committed acts that would define their destinies, and both illustrate the brutal intersection of family, power, and ambition in Westeros. Whether through fire or cunning, revenge, or destiny, these moments serve as reminders that in the world of Game of Thrones, no one is safe from the consequences of legacy, not even a dragon queen or a clever Lannister. Daenerys' rise to power and Tyrion's survival strategies are forever entwined with the deaths of their parents, creating a chilling symmetry between two of the most iconic characters in the series. It's a story of ambition, tragedy, and transformation, a stark reminder that in Westeros, sometimes the people you love most can be the catalysts for the greatest acts of change, for better or worse. The death of a parent is always profound, but in the hands of Daenerys and Tyrion, it became a defining act, one that reshaped their identities, their destinies, and the very fate of the Seven Kingdoms. And that's why their stories continue to resonate with fans around the world, a haunting testament to the enduring power of family, legacy, and the choices we make when everything is on the line.